You know just what you do.
Question: is it possible for New Zealand citizens living in Australia to apply for Australian citizenship? Answer: yes, it's possible. And we will actually talk about the details shortly, but first, welcome to the Little Cup from New Zealand to Australia, where we talk about moving abroad must-knows. I am your host, Binibining Veronica. If you are a first-time listener, I share my experience living overseas to help you prepare for your big move. So if you are moving to New Zealand or Australia and you want to plan better, please hit like and subscribe. Salamat po!
Would my girl. Next day you hit me back like nothing happened at all.
Now some overview. New Zealand citizens with a valid New Zealand passport do not need to apply for a visa before coming to Australia. If you apply and meet the criteria for a SCV or Special Category Visa Subclass 444, when you enter Australia, you will be granted this visa. So in our experience, we didn't have to do anything extra. We booked our flight, and upon landing on Brisbane Airport with our New Zealand passport, everything was just automatic and we were granted the SCV Special Category Visa 444 right there and then. It was free and we didn't have to pay anything for this visa. The whole process was also done electronically. My employer actually wanted to verify my visa through VEVO, or Visa Entitlement Verification Online, and they were able to verify this after we landed. I just provided our arrival date. Now, for your reference, Subclass 444, the Special Category Visa, allows the holder to enter and stay in Australia for as long as the holder is a New Zealand citizen. It will allow the individual to visit, work, and study in Australia. And in our situation, my husband, my daughter, and myself are all New Zealand citizens. We got our 444 visa upon arrival to Australia, and my husband and I were able to move jobs without making any changes to our visa. We were also able to apply for Medicare, which is the publicly funded healthcare program here in Australia, and we were also able to apply for childcare subsidy to help pay my daughter's daycare. I will talk more about Medicare and childcare subsidy application on a different video, but if you are enjoying this podcast, please hit subscribe, turn on your notification bell so you will know when I upload new podcasts just like this one. And if you want to support the channel, click that super thanks icon or simply buy me a coffee by clicking the link below. And that link is buymeacoffee.com/binibiningver. It does take a lot of time to put podcast and video together, so I would be really grateful if you can support what I do here on YouTube. Alternatively, a big thumbs up also goes a long way. Salamat po! Now, back onto our 444 visa. I am really grateful for it because as an immigrant, I have experienced the anxiety and uncertainty of living and working overseas under a work visa. Not to mention, if you've had enough with your current working situation, it is not as easy to move to a different job because you have to apply for a work visa variation. At least that's for my example in New Zealand setting. By the way, I am not really comfortable talking about visas because I am not an expert on that topic. I believe it is best for you to check government websites for this information, so just take this discussion as a general conversation. For more details about visa application, please check immigration.govt.nz for New Zealand and imi.homeaffairs.gov.au for Australia. Again, I will write the link in the description box below for your reference. Alright, so while the 444 visa allows the holder to enter and stay in Australia for as long as the holder is a New Zealand citizen, just know that at the end of the day, 444 visa is still a temporary visa, and long-term, there are some benefits of becoming an Australian permanent resident and eventually an Australian citizen. There is actually a video about this created by New Zealand's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I will share the link to this video in the description box below. But the transcript reads, if you are a New Zealand citizen living in Australia, Australian citizenship would allow you and your family to fully participate in Australian society, to vote and join the political debate, and to work for the public service for the Australian Defence Force. It will also provide you with a peace of mind that you and your family will receive the same social support as Australian citizens. Plus, you will always be welcome back in New Zealand as a dual national and you can keep your New Zealand passport. Now, for your reference, how New Zealanders get citizenship depends if the individual moved to Australia before February 26, 2001, in which the process may be generally easier as the person might be treated as a permanent resident already. If you moved after February 26, 2001, you will need to obtain permanent resident and then citizenship. Specifically, there was actually a visa pathway for New Zealanders called 189 Visa New Zealand Stream, but this is only applicable to New Zealand citizens who hold a special category subclass 444 visa, have been usually resident in Australia for a continuous period of 5 years immediately prior to application, and have commenced that period of usual residence on or before February 19, 2016, have a taxable income at or above an income threshold for each income year in the 5 years prior to lodging an application, unless claiming an exemption, meet mandatory health, character, and national security checks, lodge a visa application, and pay the relevant visa application charge. So for this particular residency pathway, it can be challenging if you are a New Zealand citizen who arrived in Australia after February 19, 2016, or if you are unable to meet the income threshold. Hence, other New Zealanders like me applied through a different visa pathway in order to get permanent residency in Australia. With the residency pathway that I took, I had to complete an English test, a modified skills assessment through ANMAC, or Australian Nursing and Midwifery Accreditation Council. My husband also took this modified skills assessment, and from memory, we paid $8,000 for the Australian permanent resident visa application for our family. However, here comes the good news for New Zealand citizens living in Australia who are wanting to eventually become Australian citizens. Let me read the article. From July 1, 2023, New Zealand citizens who have been living in Australia for 4 years or more will be eligible to apply directly for Australian citizenship. They will no longer need to first apply for and be granted a permanent visa. These changes apply to New Zealand citizens holding a special category subclass 444 visa who arrive in Australia after February 26, 2001. Protected SCV holders will continue to be eligible to apply directly for Australian citizenship. For New Zealand citizens who are long-term residents in Australia, this will be achieved by backdating their period of permanent residence for citizenship purposes. This will allow them to meet the 12-month permanent residence period under the general residence requirement. For your reference, the general residence requirement for Australian citizenship by conferral is set out in the Australian Citizenship Act 2007. To meet the general residence requirement, an applicant must be lawfully present in Australia for 4 years, including 12 months as a permanent resident immediately before the date of application. With effect from July 1, 2023, all New Zealand citizens holding an SCV will be considered permanent residents for citizenship purposes. New Zealand citizens granted an SCV before July 1, 2022 will have their period of permanent residence for citizenship purposes backdated to July 1, 2022. New Zealand citizens granted an SCV for the first time on or after July 1, 2022 will be considered a permanent resident for citizenship purposes from the date of their SCV grant. These provisions will apply to New Zealand citizens in Australia. It will also apply to New Zealand citizens who are overseas but held an SCV immediately before last leaving Australia. These provisions will not apply to citizenship applications submitted before July 1, 2023. If you submit your citizenship application before this date and you do not meet the eligibility requirements, your application will be refused and you will not be entitled to a refund. For further information regarding these changes, please check the Australian immigration website regularly. Now, the backdating of permanent residence for SCV holders will also impact children born to SCV holders. From July 1, 2023, any child born in Australia on or after July 1, 2022 to an SCV holder may automatically acquire Australian citizenship at birth. From July 1, 2023, children who meet these circumstances can apply for evidence of citizenship. These changes will deliver on the commitment made by the Australian Prime Minister in July 2022 to ensure viable pathways to Australian citizenship for New Zealand citizens living in Australia. This also reflects the close ties between our two nations and highlights the positive contribution New Zealand citizens make to Australia. Now, what about New Zealand citizens with 189 visa, which is a permanent resident visa? Let me read the relevant article. From January 1, 2023, New Zealand stream skilled independent subclass 189 visa holders who have previously held a special category subclass 444 visa will have the commencement of their permanent residence period for Australian citizenship purposes backdated to January 1, 2022. This also applies to their New Zealand citizen family members who hold a skilled independent subclass 189 visa. Again, the general residence requirement for Australian citizenship by conferral is set out in the Australian Citizenship Act 2007. To meet the general residence requirement, an applicant must be lawfully present in Australia for 4 years, including 12 months as a permanent resident immediately before the date of application. The backdating of permanent residence means that from January 1, 2023, New Zealand stream skilled independent subclass 189 visa holders are eligible to apply for Australian citizenship by conferral immediately following visa grant without needing to hold this visa for 12 months. Before applying, applicants should confirm their eligibility by checking the Australian immigration website. The backdating of permanent residence also affects children born in Australia to certain special category subclass 444 visa holders. Children born in Australia between January 1, 2022 and June 30, 2023, before the grant of their parents' New Zealand stream skilled independent subclass 189 visa, and where this visa was also granted between these dates, may retrospectively acquire Australian citizenship automatically by birth. Children who meet these circumstances can apply for evidence of citizenship. These changes support the close ties between our two nations and the positive contribution New Zealand citizens make to Australia. So overall, the proposed direct pathway to Australian citizenship for New Zealand citizens will be more straightforward and cheaper, and this change is really welcomed. When I heard about this news, I immediately thought of my friend who is a New Zealand citizen. She is a registered nurse, and her husband, I think he is an engineer, and their daughter is also a registered nurse. They are all living in Victoria and moved there after 2016. So during their time, it was challenging to become an Australian permanent resident, and they have actually pretty much gave up on that thought. So I was really happy because the implementation of this direct pathway will be beneficial for them, considering they've lived here for the last 7 years, paid their taxes, and they are active in the workforce, serving their community. So yeah, I'm just really happy that they will finally get this opportunity. In my experience, as I've mentioned, we arrived after 2016, so we didn't qualify for the New Zealand Stream 189 visa. Our residency application was really challenging, and I had to take an English test and complete modified skills assessment. My husband also completed a modified skills assessment, and it was costly, and we also had to ask for professional reference from our previous employers in the last 10 years. During this stressful time, someone actually wondered why I was going through such trouble, and personally, I think it's because I am hyper aware that I am an immigrant living overseas. And if there is an opportunity to become a citizen of that country where I want to live indefinitely, then I'd like to pursue that.
You know just what you do.
To be a citizen would allow me to fully participate in society, which includes having the ability to vote. So that includes voting leaders, which will have authority over how our country is governed, and voting on issues that affect the country. So for example, in 2020, in conjunction with 2020 New Zealand general election, those who can vote were also asked about New Zealand end-of-life choice referendum and cannabis referendum. I think I value voting much more now compared to when I was younger. That ability to be heard, to be treated equally, to be part of decision-making that will shape the society we live in has become very important, especially now that I have a daughter. I don't want her to experience anything less just because we moved in another country. I'd like her to have the same rights as with any other Australian citizen, because this is the country where she will spend her childhood and grow, have her own adventure, and pursue her goals and dreams. Earlier on this podcast, I also mentioned that for New Zealand citizens living in Australia, New Zealand's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade also supports the idea of becoming a dual citizen. In a video, they said that it will also provide you with a peace of mind that you and your family will receive the same social support as Australian citizens, plus you will always be welcome back in New Zealand as a dual national and you can keep your New Zealand passport. Let's talk more about that social support aspect of becoming an Australian citizen, but first, for my listeners who are nurses, just know that we have a Tagalog group chat for nurses wanting to become a registered nurse in New Zealand and for NZRNs who are wanting to be registered in Australia. The Discord link is in the description box below. Alternatively, you can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Binibining Veronica. It does take a lot of my time and creative effort in putting podcasts and videos together, so thank you so much for liking and sharing my content. Now back to the topic on hand. For comparison, you know how in New Zealand we have work and income, tahiranga tangata. In Australia, we have Centrelink. Centrelink delivers social security payments and services to Australians. If you check Centrelink website, you'll see there's various support available to Australian citizens and permanent residents in terms of raising kids, living arrangements, aging, work, education, and health and disability. If you use a search box and type New Zealand citizens claiming payments in Australia, you will be given more information about what Centrelink payments you may be eligible for. In my experience, I also checked servicesaustralia.gov.au to give me a bit of overview. As I have shared, when I arrived in Australia, I held a special category visa, but just know that within that category, you can be classified as protected or non-protected SCV holder. For me, as a non-protected SCV holder, I was able to claim childcare subsidy for my daughter. In that website, it also mentioned that non-protected SCV holders may be able to claim family tax benefit, newborn upfront payment and newborn supplement, single income family supplement, double orphan pension, and healthcare card. Obviously, you will have to meet the eligibility criteria set by the government, but I am just sharing you this general information to give you some idea what to research further. Please check the Centrelink website for a detailed information. Overall, as a New Zealand citizen living in Australia, there are limitations to what social support we can get. But we didn't move here for the sole purpose of getting social support, right? My husband and I both have permanent jobs as registered nurses. We are hustling for financial freedom, comfortable retirement, and we also have safety nets in place in terms of having insurance policies. But in case something happens, it will still be a comforting thought to know that as citizens, there are some supports which the government can provide. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that Australia is perfect in supporting their most vulnerable citizens because there are certainly gaps in their services that can still be improved. But at the very least, there is a pathway to obtain financial help and it is accessible for those who are eligible, and if change is merited, the people expect the government to take action and be accountable. Personally, I think there is a sense of moral obligation for the state to care for its most vulnerable. How about you? What do you think about this new direct pathway to Australian citizenship for New Zealand citizens? Let me know in the comment section below. If you think this podcast is helpful, share it. Share this information to a friend and check out my other podcast about moving to New Zealand versus moving to Australia must-knows. As always, I wish you all the best with your journey and I hope you will be blessed. I'll see you soon. Bye!
Living life, every day, late at night, not okay. All I want, and I pray, all I need are some better days.